Duke Edmund Ashcombe did not believe in love. He believed in ledgers, in duty, and in the quiet certainty that every woman who smiled at him was really smiling at his title. He had inherited that title too young, at 22, when his father died suddenly, and left him a great house, a great fortune, and a great emptiness. Since then, he had watched women flatter him at balls, praise his manners he did not have, and laugh at jokes he never made. He had learned to see through all of it, or so he believed. When his aunt suggested Eleanor Whitmore as a suitable match, Edmund expected nothing different. Eleanor's family had once been respectable, but years of poor decisions and worse luck had left them with little more than their name. A marriage to a duke would lift them out of hardship in a single stroke. Edmund assumed Eleanor understood this as well as anyone, and that she, like all the others, wanted what his title could give her. He met her only twice before the wedding. She was quiet both times, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes steady but never eager. She did not flatter him. She did not laugh too loudly at things that were not funny. She simply answered his questions plainly, and asked very little in return. Edmund found this strange, but he told himself it was only a different kind of performance. Some women pretended to want him. Perhaps Eleanor had decided that pretending not to want anything was a cleverer way to win him over. They married in early autumn, in a small ceremony with more silence than celebration. Eleanor wore a simple gray dress, not the fine gowns other brides chose to display their new status. Edmund noticed this too, and filed it away as further proof of her cunning. A woman playing modesty, he thought, was still playing a part. The first weeks of their marriage passed quietly. Eleanor moved into Ashcombe Hall without complaint, taking a modest set of rooms rather than the grand chambers meant for a duchess. She spent her mornings in the old library, reading books that had gathered dust for years, and her afternoons walking the gardens alone. She did not ask for new dresses. She did not request jewelry. She did not even ask to redecorate a single room, though every duchess before her had changed the house to suit her taste within a month of arriving. Edmund watched her carefully, waiting for the mask to slip. He was certain that beneath her quiet manner was a woman calculating her next move, waiting for the right moment to ask for something grand. Weeks turned into months, and still nothing came. Instead, what he noticed were smaller things. Eleanor rose earlier than the rest of the household. She wrote letters by candlelight long after the other servants had gone to bed. Once a month, without fail, a small parcel left the house addressed to a village Edmund did not recognize, tied with plain string and marked with no return name. He told himself it did not matter. A man in his position could not concern himself with every quiet habit of his wife. But the parcels continued, month after month, and his curiosity grew into something sharper. He began to imagine explanations far worse than the truth. Perhaps she was sending money to a lover from her past. Perhaps she was involved in some scheme her family had arranged before the wedding, using her position as duchess to funnel money quietly out of the estate. The longer he thought about it, the more his old suspicion hardened into quiet resentment. He had been right about her all along, he told himself. She had simply hidden her true purpose better than he expected. One evening, unable to bear the silence between them any longer, Edmund asked her directly what she sent each month and to whom. Eleanor's expression did not change, but something in her eyes grew careful, guarded, the way a person looks when they are protecting something fragile. "It is nothing that concerns the estate," she said. "I use only my own small allowance, nothing more." That was true, in fact. Edmund's man of business later confirmed that not a single shilling of the estate's money had gone missing. Eleanor spent only what was given to her personally as duchess, and even that, sparingly. But the truth did not satisfy him. If she was hiding nothing wrong, why hide it at all? He decided, coldly, that he would find out for himself. His chance came a few months later, when estate business required him to travel north, close to the village where Eleanor's parcels were always sent. He told no one of his plan. He simply arranged to pass through the village on his return journey, telling himself he only wished to see it, nothing more. The village was small and unremarkable, the kind of place easily missed on a map. Edmund asked a local innkeeper, carefully, if he knew of any household connected to a Mrs. Whitmore, or now, a Duchess of Ashcombe. The innkeeper's face lit up with warmth Edmund had not expected. "Ah," he said, You must mean the lady who sends for the children's home. Everyone here knows her kindness, though we've never met her ourselves. Just her letters and her help." Edmund felt something shift inside his chest, a strange, unsettled feeling he could not name. "Children's home," he repeated. The innkeeper nodded, gesturing down the lane. "Just past the old chapel. Run by a kind old woman now, though it nearly closed years back when the founder passed. Some say the daughter of the woman who started it still supports it, quiet-like, never wanting thanks." Edmund walked to the chapel alone, his mind turning over questions he had never thought to ask his wife. The building beyond it was modest, but well kept, with fresh paint on the shutters and neat rows of vegetables growing in a small garden. Children's laughter drifted from somewhere inside, bright and unguarded. An older woman answered his knock, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. When Edmund introduced himself, her eyes widened with surprise, then softened with something like relief. "Her Grace never told us she'd wed a duke who might come calling," the woman said, smiling faintly. Come in. You'll want to see what she has kept alive all these years." Inside, Edmund found a home filled with worn but well-loved furniture. Patched clothing hung neatly to dry, and shelves of simple wooden toys clearly repaired many times over. Children of various ages moved through the rooms, some doing chores, some studying at a long table, all of them looking healthier and better cared for than Edmund had expected from a place surviving on so little. The woman explained, as she made tea Edmund barely touched, the true history of the place. Years ago, Eleanor's mother had founded the home after losing her own younger brother to sickness in a workhouse, vowing that no child in her care would ever face such neglect again. She had poured what little her family had into keeping it running, but after her husband's failed investments and her own declining health, the money dwindled. On her deathbed, she had made her daughter promise to keep the home alive, no matter the cost, no matter how she had to manage it. Eleanor was barely 18 when her mother died, the woman continued. She had nothing to offer at first but her own labor. She would come herself in those early years, scrubbing floors, mending clothes, teaching the older children their letters. When her family's fortunes fell further, and she could no longer travel so often, she found other ways. Small amounts here and there, anything she could spare. Edmund sat in silence, his tea growing cold, as the picture in his mind slowly rearranged itself. He had imagined Eleanor as calculating, secretive, perhaps even deceitful. Instead, he was hearing of a young woman who had quietly shouldered a promise to her dying mother and carried it alone for years, never once asking for recognition or help, not even from the husband she had married. "Why would she not simply tell me?" he asked, more to himself than to the woman across from him. The woman studied him for a long moment, before answering gently, "Perhaps, Your Grace, she did not believe you would understand. Or perhaps she feared that if she asked for your help, you might think less of her family, of where she came from, of a mother who died with debts unpaid, and a home built on nothing but stubborn love. Some promises feel safer kept quiet, even from those closest to us." Edmund left the village that day, with far more than he had come seeking. The ride home felt longer than usual, filled with memories he had misread, and judgments he now regretted. He thought of Eleanor's plain gray wedding dress, her modest rooms, her refusal of jewels and gowns. He had seen all of it as strategy, as performance. He understood now that it had been something else entirely. It had been sacrifice, quiet and unspoken, made by a woman who expected nothing from him, but had given everything she had to a promise no one else even knew she carried. When he returned to Ashcombe Hall, he found Eleanor in the library, as she so often was, a book open on her lap, though her eyes were distant, fixed on nothing in particular. She looked up when he entered, and for the first time, Edmund saw not the careful mask he had assumed she always wore, but simple, quiet tiredness, the look of someone who had carried a heavy weight for a very long time. "I went north," he said simply. "I saw the children's home. I met the woman who runs it now, and she told me of your mother and of the promise you made her." Eleanor's face paled slightly, and her hands tightened around the book in her lap. She did not speak at first, clearly bracing herself for anger, for accusations of deceit, for the very suspicions Edmund had carried with him for months. Instead, Edmund crossed the room and sat across from her, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "I misjudged you," he said. "From the very beginning. I believed you married me for my title, for what I could give you. I never once considered that you might have married me carrying a burden of your own, one you never intended to ask me to share." Eleanor's eyes filled with unshed tears, though her voice remained steady. "I did not want your pity," she said, "and I did not want you to think my family nothing more than beggars hiding behind a marriage. My mother's promise was mine to keep. I did not think it fair to make it yours as well." "It became mine the moment I became your husband," Edmund said gently, "whether I understood it or not." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, and outside, the last light of evening faded slowly over the gardens Eleanor so often walked alone. Edmund reached out, carefully, and took her hand, an act so small, yet so unfamiliar between them, that Eleanor looked up, startled. "Let me help you carry it," he said, "not as charity, and not as pity, but because it is a good and honest thing you have done, far better than anything I have accomplished with my title alone." Eleanor's tears finally fell, though her expression was one of relief rather than sorrow. In all the years since her mother's death, she had never once allowed herself to imagine that someone might share the weight she carried. Least of all the husband she had believed saw her as nothing more than a convenient arrangement. In the months that followed, Edmund kept his word. He arranged for proper funds to reach the children's home, not as a secret parcel sent quietly each month, but as an open commitment made in both their names. He visited the village himself, meeting the children Eleanor had quietly supported for years, listening to their small triumphs and struggles, with an attention he had never given to society gatherings, filled with false smiles and empty flattery. Eleanor, in turn, began to open herself to him in ways she never had before, no longer guarding her days and her heart, as though expecting judgment at every turn. She redecorated, at last, one small room in the house, filling it with drawings sent by the children from the home, simple things, made with charcoal and pride, hung proudly where guests might see them. Their marriage, which had begun in silence and suspicion, slowly became something neither of them had expected. Edmund learned that trust, once given honestly, revealed far more than any performance ever could. Eleanor learned that some promises, when finally shared, grew stronger rather than weaker for the sharing. Years later, when their own children asked about the drawings on the wall, Eleanor would tell them of a promise made to a grandmother they had never known, and of a home built from nothing but love and stubbornness. Edmund would add, quietly, that it was that very promise, kept faithfully and alone for so long, that had taught him the true measure of the woman he had married. He had thought, once, that she wanted only his title. He learned, in time, that she had never wanted anything from him at all, except perhaps, eventually, the simple gift of being understood.